was going quite well until we had a number of bad debts.
Right.
Then Russia invaded Ukraine. And the materials were going up at an alarming rate.
How did you deal with that personally? How did you find that?
Oh, yeah.
No, really? Everything has a beginning, a middle and an end. On our watch, you are going to leave your business. It will be either by choice, as in you'll exit, sell it, or it'll be by circumstance. What's impressed me, but also impressed many of the people inside our community, is like how fast you seem to be able to rebuild in the last 12, 18 months.
You've learned from the mistakes, you've learned from not having systems, learned from not having financial planning.
Actually, that was a massive education. Even if it was expensive and painful, it was still an education.
If you start a business, the most important thing is you're getting the right systems, the right software, and the right people around me from the very beginning. Even without me there, that would have grown itself anyway, because they were brilliant.
Hey, I've got to generate some sales this month. What are the 3 things you're going to?
You've got to have some sort of CRM. You have to have a process for
those 3 things, and probably 3 of the best entrepreneurial skills you can master. So, welcome along to this episode of the Grown Up Business Podcast. Super excited to sit down for this conversation because I have a feeling it's going to take you on a wild journey, because the last few years have been a wild journey for my guest today. So we're going to talk about journey from family business through scaling up, through acquisitions, through going back to zero, to comeback stories, and how to scale back up to 7 figures in 12 months, and how to do this all in an industry, I think, where we're going to talk about teams. We're going to hopefully talk about kind of lessons from building teams successfully, and let's just say lots of learnings in that journey, right? And how you've really kind of leveled up, and just the 3-year journey for you as an entrepreneur. So please welcome to the Grown Up Business Podcast, member of my F12 Mastermind, Mr. Nicolas Manuel. Welcome along.
Hi, Paul. Thanks for having me.
Great to have you, man.
Yes.
Our brand new studio here in London, which is great to have you with us. So let's just go back and paint a picture, a bit of a context. So we met, I was trying to think, is it 3 or 4 years ago? I think it's
probably nearly 5, actually.
No, really?
Probably nearly 5 years ago, yeah.
Wow.
I think it's my 3rd, or this might be my 4th year in F12. So, probably nearly 5 when I first came to a meeting that Jeff invited me along to with you.
Yeah, your accountant.
And my accountant.
Yes.
Nearly 5 years ago.
And that was, we were at a hotel in St Albans, because that's where we were at the time, right? So you and your father have been running a business for how many years? So talk us through that background, that story.
Yeah, so I started off in the advertising world. Right. Originally, worked for an advertising agency in the production department.
Okay.
Running the print campaigns within a very, very, very fast-moving agency.
Right.
And my dad worked as sales director in a large format print company.
Okay.
And then we were both sort of disillusioned with finding a supplier that would work to our stupid timeframes and would be responsive enough, but also someone that would be able to do everything without saying, well, we don't do that, because they couldn't be bothered, really.
Right.
So that started when we came together and said, look, we've got a solution to solve here. That started, I would say, in about 2013.
Right.
Where we came together.
And what size did that business get to? Where did you grow it to together?
Well, that business, we got it up to nearly 3 million in revenue.
Wow. Okay.
It changed a lot, especially when the pandemic came.
Yeah.
The business kind of pivoted when the pandemic came. And that's where we got it up to.
What was it? How family-run businesses? I mean, I've worked with my father at the early part of my career. So how did you find family? Like, how's the family dynamics with running a business like that?
Yeah, it was very strange at first, because Dad had always sort of had his own businesses.
Right.
Whereas I was new to business. And when we started together, I had only ever really been employed. So
right.
I was very much sort of working under his guidance at first.
Right.
But then as the business grew and grew and grew, I think it was quite obvious that we thought about business in different ways.
Okay.
I wouldn't say it was a challenge. I think every business has its challenges where you want to go in one direction and someone wants to go in the other, or you think about things differently. But I'd say up until, I suppose, probably the pandemic, it was like working with my best friend. I was working every single day.
Nice.
Day in, day out.
Nice.
Together. So
So when we met, you were on the journey of wanting to scale that business, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And what was your ambition? What was your vision at the time for the business?
Well, I'd only just opened a manufacturing facility,
Right.
which was a massive change for what we were doing up until that point.
Yeah.
But I had visions of having a self-supporting group and getting it up to probably between, I'd say pushing, what I really wanted at first was it to get to about 10 million in revenue.
Right.
Yeah, that was my vision for it at the time. I think Dad's vision was maybe not to do that.
His vision was to go to Spain, retire, and enjoy his life, right? Which you can't blame it for either. Right?
No, so yeah, and that came with that was a very, very steep learning curve.
So that just to paint the picture. So you had a business. That was an acquisition, though. Yes.
No. I had a business. So our business originally was a print agency.
Right.
And we worked predominantly with advertising and design agencies, which is where I'd come from, and that was most of Dad's clients at the time as well.
Right.
And we started out specialising in agency pitch work. So it was very, very, very fast turnaround. Often, I had a camp bed in the office. I didn't really go home very much, which was good because I was single, so it's fine. But yeah, so the artwork would come in at 10, 11 o'clock at night and they'd need it back by 6 in the morning.
Wow.
So I'd be on the camp bed waiting for the artwork to come over. It was always late. And it would be charging around London in the middle of the night, getting someone to actually print it so that we could drop it back to the agency in the morning. And that's how it started. It was just me and him. And up until the point of the pandemic, it grew and it grew and it grew, and we got into workspace and design agencies and construction. And we were doing nearly 3 million, and we were based in central London, and there was probably about 12 of us.
Okay.
At that place. And then the pandemic came, and I remember standing in the office and we knew the lockdown was coming, and we kind of all walked out of that London office and went, see you on the other side. And we never went back.
Really?
I never went back to that office. Well, I did, to get the laptops and computers. And then everything changed after that. So, it was an interesting time because most of our suppliers at that time shut their doors.
Right.
And said, no, we're closed. It's not safe to be open. For our type of work, some of them were doing like critical work that they had to do, but we still had lots of orders coming from our clients at the time, social distancing signage and stuff that we could.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, there's suddenly the whole other demand for things that,
which we couldn't get done. So it was an interesting time. So that's when we went into manufacturing ourselves.
Right. And then when did you have the idea that the fastest way to kind of get to the vision was to look at acquisitions? When did you kind of start to have that idea?
So before the pandemic even came, about a year before that, I was really, really interested in acquisitions.
Right.
And I was already having phone calls to people, talking to people, because I was going to, up until the point, was to get a competitor, was the plan.
Right.
Was to try and find a competitor that we could bolt on to.
Yeah.
Really ramp it up. But then obviously that changed as soon as the pandemic hit. But that's when I got into looking at other things we could do to generate leads fundamentally.
Yeah.
For the business that would complement what we were doing.
Was that when you started with the whole balloons side of things? Yeah. So you had like a sort of people looking for balloons, and you ended up having a website, and then you'd flick them on the back end into, if they're having balloons, they must need other things for events.
Yes.
Yeah. Was that really the first time you started looking at things like funnels and stuff like that?
Yes, I would say so. Yeah, it was actually after the balloon acquisition was done, we started looking at funnels and way to automatically convert leads into cross-selling.
Yeah.
But actually, before the balloon business came around, we wanted to get our own manufacturing facility.
Right.
So I was looking for a large format print company that we could acquire, that was already set up, that we could put our work into.
Right.
But there weren't really any around that weren't really on their knees because of the pandemic.
Yeah.
That were for sale. So then the brewing company came around, which was great actually. It
was a good fit.
was a good fit.
There's a lot of inbound leads from that, from memory, wasn't there? Really?
Yeah, probably about 20 a day.
Yeah, which is nice.
Events companies and people doing exhibitions and stuff like that. So.
And what do you think the top takeaway was from you about that in terms of just looking at it through a customer journey standpoint? What are the top takeaways from that kind of, thinking, okay, hang on a second, if we put a product in front, there's an opportunity to generate customers almost, because they're looking for what we do as opposed to trying to sell what we do.
Yeah, so let's say they were already looking. So the hardest thing I think in business is getting a consistent flow of high quality leads.
I would say that's the number one thing most people will say they are trying to solve. Yeah,
which is challenging, especially in print as well, because the people that are looking for the high margin events sorts of companies,
right?
They have suppliers, but they're all very last minute. So and there's a big pool of large format printers they could go online and find.
Right.
So the fact that they were going on to buy balloons for an event meant that we could cross sell all of our services pretty easily, and we'd take maybe £100 order value of a balloon and convert it into £1,000 order value.
Yeah, nice upsell, 10x.
Nice upsell.
Yeah, nice.
But we needed some sort of system to be able to do that because there was lots coming through all the time.
And what I love about what you've done is that you've kind of committed to learning how to plug all that stuff together, haven't you? Because you're not naturally technical.
No. I'd say I am quite technical, but I don't have the ability to maintain the implementation.
Right. Okay.
I drift.
You get distracted a little bit. So what, like for you, what's been, I think it's an interesting question because like for you, in what ways do you think you've leveled up as a leader then over the last 3 or 4 years? How have you changed as a leader?
I have managed to be a lot more calculated now about what I'm doing.
Okay.
Everything I do now is backed with financial evidence that it can happen rather than just doing stuff. Yeah. Because you can.
Yeah.
I think the way I manage teams and hire people, to be honest, every single aspect of business that you could possibly learn about over the last 3 years or 4 years, I've learned.
Yeah, it's a pretty intense education process, isn't it? I think that would be fair, right? I think. Yeah. I think around the financial piece as well, you went on quite a journey with that, really. Because I think a lot of people go. I think a lot of entrepreneurs, they have the vision, they like the sales, but it comes to looking at numbers, it's generally the stuff they avoid, I would say, and it's got the numbers, whereas actually, I think if you don't understand where the profit is in your business, there's a very big risk that you run out of cash because you either overinvest or you get excited by the next idea and you don't actually know what's making you money. I talk about where's the the margin in your model, and most people don't, I think, have a level of clarity around that.
Yeah, and also depending on what business you're in, but there's what you think you're making. And then what you're actually making are two completely different things. And it's like that analogy of having a pint of water when you win the job.
Right.
And then for us, with the factory, is trying to run that pint of water through the factory and see how much you had left at the end.
Of it. Yeah.
And without proper systems and financial controls in place, that water would be gone and you wouldn't even realise.
No.
Because it could be leaking out of just from customer service, from the orders being wrong, the materials not being, for us personally in our industry, the stuff not being ganged up on a sheet, how someone has quoted it, it was a minefield. And also the forward planning element of.
Well, and having to keep the machines operational 80% of the time or they're not making you money, right?
Controlling sales teams and looking at what you're actually selling so that they're not just selling cheap work.
Yep.
Where your machines are actually running like the absolute clappers. You can't fill them up anymore, but there's still not enough margin because it's all cheap.
And then you end up having service issues to the machines and replacement parts and all of that, whereas actually most of the work you've been putting through wasn't making any money either.
Yeah.
Which I think it's interesting because I think you can see that more so in a production kind of environment, right? You can see it more. Whereas I think in a service-based business, it's harder to see where the money's leaking.
Yep.
Because it's usually people. So it's usually you've hired the wrong people, or you've got too many people, right? And I mean, I think recruitment's been one of the biggest learning points for you, right?
Definitely. And being able to track output, definitely.
Right.
Definitely being over having too many team members, or not enough, either or.
Yeah.
How
do you deal with that though? How's your approach to that? Because I think I often get asked questions by entrepreneurs who say to me, "Oh, how do you balance between knowing when to hire and when to let go?" Or constant tension between sort of like the delivery side and the sales side. There's always tension, isn't there? Right, like between those two elements. How do you manage that?
It's a challenge, because what I've done in the past is you get like a month of being really busy, and you're like, "This is it. This is gonna," So then you hire someone, but then something drops.
Yeah.
Then you haven't quite got enough. So it is a challenge finding that balance. I mean, I've put systems in place now that I can see exactly what's happening, and I can see, if we're doing quotes, if they're not quite going back at the speed, or if then they're not being followed up, or so it's hard to say. I haven't got a way of pinpointing now's the right time to get someone.
Right.
But you kind of just have that feeling,
Well, I think, don't you think it comes back to if you can see a pipeline for the next sort of 2-3 months out that's really robust and growing, and the trend is there. And I think a lot of that comes down to how predictable is your lead flow on the front end. If your lead flow on the front end is really predictable, then you have a level of certainty about doing it.
Yep.
Whereas I think if you haven't got visibility of a pipeline of work, or that every day you're getting 20, 30 leads in, and out of those you're going to convert 10, and the average order value is 300, 400, 500 pounds, you can build a model out of it.
Yeah.
And then I think you can go, well, okay, we can afford, to do that. I was having a conversation with a client of mine recently, £6 million turnover business, and he was like, right, great, we need to hire another 4 people. And I was like, hang on a second. Be like, A, before we do that, that's a fairly chunky investment. B, have we got a level of certainty that there is enough demand in the market to support it? But also, if you think in that particular industry, it takes 6 to 9 months for those people to get up to speed and be really profitable salespeople, that means you're carrying 4 overhead, 4 salaries for 6 to 9 months.
Yeah.
That's a chunky old investment if you haven't modeled it right.
And it's not always, let's add a salesperson.
Yeah.
Because actually it could be a conversion problem.
Yeah.
It could be a system problem. It could be lots of other things going on in the back end, or other things you could do to automate.
Yes.
But then not has to add a person.
Yep.
Like what we're starting to do with our follow-ups and our sequencing and stuff like that. Well, coming back to the making a decision on a person, I think, so for us, we use a piece of software we can model sort of 12 weeks out.
Yeah.
3 months, however far out we want to go.
Yeah. What are you using again? I forget which one do you use.
It's called Frutility.
Frutility. Oh, yes. Yeah.
Like and it plugs into your Xero and everything else, and you can model it out. And we're actually in a meeting last week, and we're looking at it going, well, we've actually got £500,000 worth of work that's not gone ahead yet. It's basically in our pipeline.
Right.
And looking at it going like, is this a software issue? Or if we were to put a person in, how much of that 500,000 do they have to convert?
Yeah.
To then, for them to pay for themselves.
Yes.
And some, then you can start actually looking at it and planning out ahead. But unless you've got forward sight like that, you are winging it.
Yeah, and I think too many, as part of becoming a grown-up business, I think, is that actually having forecasting tools.
Yeah.
Right. Or dashboards of any kind, actually. And by the way, and this doesn't, something that often gets said, I get asked the question quite a lot, which is, what size do you become a grown-up business? I say it's got nothing to do with the size you are. I can introduce you to, 12 and 14 million pound turnover businesses that are not grown-ups yet because they don't have a dashboard.
Yeah.
They don't have, a proper recruitment strategy or they don't have a way of financially forecasting and tracking. And, which is, so I think once you suddenly get that tool set, do you ever feel like you wonder how you survived as long as you did without it?
Well, absolutely. And also, right, so how many people have you met that do this? They go, I'm owed this much.
Yep.
I owe that much, and I've got this much in the bank, so we're all good.
Yep.
And
the only 3 metrics you should track.
And it's like, and that's how I used to be. And if I could go right back to the beginning and have a serious FD in from the very beginning before anyone else, because there's so many other things. Like when I buy this, how does it affect my cash flow in 8 weeks' time?
Yeah,
by making this purchase.
So that's an interesting question, actually. So let's talk, CFO, right?
Yeah.
Chief Financial Officer. Like, at what point do you think they start to contribute a massive amount of value on the journey? Like, where do you think that? Because I think there's a point at which you go, actually, I need that strategic advice. But there's also a point at which you go, actually, I just need a really good finance manager, like a really good finance manager who, in my experience, usually pays for themselves really quickly.
Yeah.
So, like, what's your take on that? Having sort of tried both at different times.
I think that it comes down to, first of all, having a really good bookkeeper.
Yep.
Who is actually, posting the stuff properly, and because if the information at the very big bottom is not right, then it's going to be wrong all the way out. And I think then you need, up until I would say probably a million, you'd need a really good finance person, but not a CFO.
No.
As someone who you should be up until that point, I'd say even about 500,000, you should have a cash flow forecast. You should have a budget.
Yes, you should.
You should have a process to credit control.
But it's amazing how many people will get to 5 million and not have budgets.
Yeah.
Just not have any kind of budgeting. And I think it's like, well, hang on a second, and there's an interesting question here, which is people often say, well, how do you budget? And I'm like, well, you start with the end in mind. So you always start with the profit you want to make for the year. Okay, great. I want to make £500,000 profit, 250,000 profit, £50,000 profit, doesn't matter, whatever your number is. So that's the end goal. Then you work back and go, right, okay, great. What's the margins I'm operating on? How much did I sell last year? How much do I need to increase the margin to hit that target? And therefore, how many sales do I need extra every month to get to that number?
Yeah, and then break it down even further into
days,
types of business.
Yeah.
If it's certain clients that you need to hit a certain figure on.
Yep.
Industry, go as far as you like with it.
Yeah, but I think you can't act on fact. I think most people are not acting on fact, right? There's just, they get to the end of the year and go, is that how much I made? Oh, crap. Or
they haven't got enough for their corporation tax bill.
Right.
Or, even little things. I used to do this in the early days. You're looking at the bank and the VAT money's not yours.
Yes.
And suddenly you've got a big VAT bill.
Yeah.
You shouldn't have a big VAT bill because it's not your money.
Yeah. No, well,
they're little things you learn.
Yeah, and I mean, I think there's a great book called Profit First, which is all about that whole principle, right? And about going, okay, great, we need a separate. I always say you go through 1 quarter of pain when you set it all up, where you go, right, you've got to learn to live on less liquidity than you're used to, and then set up a separate account, and all the VAT, any tax that is due goes straight into that, and you don't even touch it.
Yeah.
And if you don't do that, I think you just end up using that liquidity when actually you should be driving sales rather you get, it creates a level of comfort that you think you've got more money to play with than you have.
Absolutely right. Yeah. I mean, my bank is set up so it automatically moves a percentage out into another account. Don't even see it. It just goes.
Yeah.
Which is something I never used to do.
No, good tip though.
The hard way.
Yeah. But it's a good tip, isn't it? It's like, and I think a lot of that comes back to the fact, in my experience, most businesses are underfunded when they start up. They don't have enough capital for the first year. So they borrow from the government in some way, shape or form to use that money.
Yeah.
But that will catch up with you. You can't outrun that.
No, yeah, it does.
You're not going to outrun that one. It is due, right? At some particular point. So let's talk team, because you've had quite a number. You've had, I mean, what was the peak size team you had when you had the factory and stuff? How big was the team then?
30.
Yeah, so that's a big team, right? And now you're down to a much leaner team, sort of more, what, 5, 6?
4.
4.
Yeah.
That's lean.
Yeah.
So turnover per head at this point is much, much better than it ever was before.
Yeah. So we're probably 300,000 a head now.
Yeah, nice.
Per head.
And like, what did you learn about having the team that what was some of the, let's unpack some of the key lessons that you had around the teams?
Or, yeah.
Because you had some hard decisions in there as well, right?
Lots of hard decisions, lots of holding on to people for longer than I should,
Right.
because they're your friends and you want to make it work. Me learning a lot about hiring myself.
Right.
I always just hire people that I liked. So many people do that.
Yep.
Like, you get to an interview, last 10 minutes, like, yeah, they're just like me, it's great. And actually, I'm not looking for someone just like me. I'm looking for someone the complete opposite.
Yep.
That you shouldn't have too many people without a manager.
Okay.
Managing them.
Right.
I think Jeff Bezos says you should be able to share a pizza in a team, and that's so true. It's really tricky. I've always found it quite difficult hiring. Things like contribution compass.
Yeah.
Really, 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 really help.
Right.
Because you know what you're looking for before you met them.
Yeah.
What else have I done? Letting things slip.
Okay.
Shouldn't have let things slip. Been too
soft.
Too soft.
Right.
Definitely. Yeah, there's so many, Paul, to be honest. I've had to let lots of people go.
Yeah. That's hard though, right? But that's hard.
Me more than anything else, because it's, I went from having a small team to a big team very quickly.
Yes.
And I thought I'd hire in really senior people to run the teams, but they also need managing too.
Yeah.
And if you put the one wrong person in, it can upset the
whole lot.
The whole lot very quickly.
Do you think the team outgrew your leadership skills at that particular point?
I think the whole business did.
Right.
To be honest.
Right.
I think it did grow quite quickly, but going from having basically a sales agency to a full-scale manufacturing
totally different business with totally different
12 months is a completely different thing.
Well, also, I mean, like the business that you're running at that point, it's all about optimization, systems, processes, tiny little percentages here and there that add up across lots and lots of product manufacturing, right?
Yep.
And then if you're off by 1 or 2%, that's your margin gone.
Yep.
And your profile's not really one that loves attention to detail.
Not really.
Which is probably why you were, to be fair, which is probably why you were attracted to the whole creative industry in the first place, yes, right? I mean, like you were probably attracted to working in that industry because it was fast, it was dynamic, and now you
creative.
Yeah, now you switch without almost realizing it. You switched the entire business around, and suddenly now you've got a business that's completely not really your flow.
Yeah, it was very, very challenging. I actually think we did a really good job in the period of time. From getting the systems and the process, where I went wrong in that business was not having a proper finance CFO in from the beginning. I think you can get by when you've got a serviced office and a few people. That's a completely different thing.
Yeah.
And I had a CFO in. It was almost too late.
Do you think most people just don't see that as a worthwhile investment, or they just don't see the problems that it will help them solve?
I think at the first you don't realise the impact that person will have.
Right.
Until you suddenly notice.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's a challenge. It was a challenge.
So what happened to that business at the end of it? What was the kind of point when you went, yeah, this isn't going to scale like I hoped it would?
There were many factors. It was going quite well until we had a number of bad debts.
Right.
That weren't forecasted, weren't planned for at all. And then Russia invaded Ukraine.
Right.
and the materials were going up an alarming rate every single day, 5%, 10%, 5%, and at the same time, the electricity bill went up by sort of like from $2,000 a month to $12,000 a month.
Wow.
Like pretty much like that. Like it just happened. So the clients were wanting to spend less, but the material prices were going up. And we didn't have the forecasting ability to see as far out as we needed to see.
Well, where the squeeze was, essentially.
The squeeze was going to happen, yeah.
Yeah.
And we lost a lot of money from the bad debts. And it was a great shame, really.
How did you deal with that personally? How did you find that?
Hard.
Yeah.
Very challenging. I think the company was my baby for 12 years. And at the crunch point where it came up to October 23, terrible. Probably the worst thing I've ever had to go through.
Yeah.
And a lot of people turn on you at the time it happens.
Yep.
And even people that you looked after. But I had my whole life backed that business. Huge personal guarantees.
Yeah.
That you never think would ever get called in.
Yep.
Yeah.
Would you ever do anything where you'd sign personal guarantees again, or are you done with them? Yeah.
No, I wouldn't. Not after I put my family through. I wouldn't.
No.
Wouldn't. But it's hard. I think it's hard because from the outside, everyone, it looks as though everything's absolutely fine. There's lots of challenges. There's lots of things that were my fault.
Yeah.
Things that weren't my fault. But the thing that you've put 12 years of your life into to go very, very quickly.
Yeah.
Wasn't hardest. I'd say it was the hardest thing that I'd ever have to go through. Not just the business side, but for the family side as well.
Yeah.
We had some pretty bad things happen.
Yeah. It's interesting, isn't it? I think, I think if you run a business long enough, at some point, you're likely to have an experience where one of them doesn't work out, or more than one potentially. And I think that's, you tend not to think about that as an entrepreneur, that everything has a cycle. There's a reason why they call it, the business wheel, the cycle. And I think everything has a beginning, a middle, and an end. It's just we don't ever think the end's going to happen on our watch. And I remember saying, when I've spoken on a couple of stages, and I've always said, listen, you are going to leave your business. It will be either by choice, as in you'll exit, sell it, or it'll be by circumstance. But be aware that this is not a finite, this is not an infinite game. You will not be running this business forever. The market will change on you. Tech will make you irrelevant suddenly. You've got to realize that at some point you're going to leave it. And I think the danger is if you become, and I've been there, where you get so attached to the brand and the brand becomes you, and you become invested in the brand. When that goes, suddenly that's your identity takes a massive hit at the same time.
It does. And I believe in the universe stuff quite a lot.
Yeah, you and I, I share that one.
Yeah, a lot of that stuff got me through, actually. Got me through the really, really dark times, weirdly enough. But I think that you can take things for granted, or you could think that everything's going to last forever, or it's going to get better.
Yeah.
But I think sometimes the universe's way of going, look, you need to learn the hard way, basically.
Yeah.
To be better. And also other things that you go through. I think I always remember the day. So I came back, stood at my front door, and I stood outside the front door for about 10 minutes, and I could hear my children on the other side of the door, and I couldn't. It gets me emotional. I didn't know how I was going to feed them or provide for them, and I didn't know if I was going to keep the house. And I had threats from people saying they were going to come round because they were owed some money from the business. And when you open the front door and your kids are there and they are happy to see you, and you're looking at them thinking, I don't know how I'm going to feed you. I don't even know if you're going to have somewhere to live. It ignites some sort of fire in your belly.
Yeah.
To keep going and keep pushing on. But it also creates a certain amount of pain that everyone I meet now, even business owners that I talk to, and I try and help a little bit along the way because I have been through it and learned.
Yeah.
I see some things people do, and I think this will catch you, and you need to take this seriously.
Yeah.
Because in the end, it will get you.
I remember after Sue was pregnant with Jonathan just been born, there was a period where it looked like we might lose the house, like where we were going to have to sell the house to keep the business afloat and all those kind of things. And I think as an entrepreneur, at that point, you have to make a decision, don't you? Like, I'm either going to go under with this or I'm going to fight my way out of it.
Yeah.
Like, did it you talked about it, did it galvanize a bit in you was that like, right, hell, I'm going to fight my way out of this, or?
Yeah, I didn't really feel like I had any choice, to be honest.
Right.
Like I had lawyers, so I had a huge amount of personal guarantees, and few people I've met in the past managed to get lawyers that specialise in personal guarantees, but it was one of those, I couldn't be on the streets, but I couldn't do that to my children. Like, they had to have somewhere to live, had to feed them. So I say it lit a fire in my belly that, well, I've got to fight this.
Yeah.
I think, I don't, because of my age, I'd already put a huge amount of money into the business anyway.
Yeah.
Rightly or wrongly, I had.
Yeah.
And so I think if you had some money and you could afford to, then a lot of people probably would put their head in the sands because it's a hard thing. But it didn't cross my mind to give up.
Nice.
Not once, because I had no choice.
Yeah.
But, I had to feed these 3 kids some way.
Yeah, they don't really care, right? They don't go, oh, what, you having a bad day, Dad? Don't really, I still need food, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I think it's a very powerful story to share. I mean, you dropped something there that I just want to go back to, though. You talked about personal guarantee expert lawyers. I think just explain like what they are and how they helped you, because I think quite often banks or lenders will put personal guarantees in place, and I think the question is, who do you ask about that, and who can give you perspective on it, who isn't necessarily on the other side of the table. So how did they help you?
So it helped me because I had to sort of deal with this certain, I won't mention them, but this certain company that lends companies money very easily. And they were trying to take the house.
Right.
And I spoke to someone that we both know, and he said, "Well, talk to this person. They're an expert in it." And actually, he'd come up against this company multiple times.
Right. So this was a strategy they used to use.
Well, yeah. So basically, what it was that they couldn't, because my wife owned half the house.
Right.
And but I didn't know that. So that's basically what he went to them and said, "Well, she doesn't agree to that." But because he'd already come up against them multiple times, they backed off straight away, because it was kind of like the wolves at the door for me.
Yeah.
But as soon as you have someone who they've come up against before, they thought, actually, this isn't going to be quite as easy as we might have thought.
Yep.
And that's where the
expert advice, isn't it? Value of expert advice.
But also because they knew who he was, they thought,
no chance there with that one.
So I managed to negotiate it.
So you had a pretty tough time, and obviously, there's that whole going through the liquidation piece, which is painful.
Yeah.
And then I think, you go, okay, great, I'm going to come back. And then I think what's impressed me, but also impressed many of the people inside our community, is like how fast you seem to be able to rebuild in the last 12, 18 months and go again.
Yeah.
What do you put that down to, first of all?
I think pressure.
Yeah, that'll do it to you. Yeah, fair point.
Pressure. Let's say the family having to pay back the personal guarantees.
Yeah.
Support my family. I also think some of it comes down to my own pride and ego.
Yep.
I never thought that would happen. So I've always needed to prove to myself that yes, it was me, but a lot of things were out of my control as well.
Yeah.
it was never not going to happen for me.
Yeah.
In my head, it was just, I don't know how to explain it.
Do you think you, because of what you'd learned though, you knew what didn't work, so therefore it was a lot easier to build a model that you went, okay, that didn't work, therefore actually that was a massive education. Even if it was expensive and painful, it was still an education.
Mm-hmm.
And therefore building a model that would scale to 7 figures in 12 months from pretty much zero, in terms of sales, not necessarily in profits, but you knew how to do it. So that skill never leaves you. I've always believed that, when you invest in yourself and you get coaching and you get training, you get development, that skill has a lifetime value, right? It has a value way beyond just the year in which you're using it. You'll use it 10. I'm still using stuff I learned from mentors of mine 10, 15 years ago.
Yeah.
And I think we don't always think about the return on knowledge or the return on education, which, can last you 15 years, right? 20 years if you continue to use it. Do you think that's what allowed you to execute faster?
Absolutely. Definitely. The amount I know now, it could be any business, to be honest. I think there's a process, and there's also people you need around you.
Yep.
And partnerships you need to have. So that whether it's this vehicle or this vehicle, you've learned from the mistakes, you've learned from not having systems, you've learned from not having financial planning, and the whole thing, and it becomes easier, definitely. Just don't want to do that again.
No, there's definitely a pain of not wanting to go near that again.
Yeah.
And what for you, what are you most proud of in the last kind of 12, 24 months? Or what are you really proud of?
I'm proud of my team, because along that journey, I couldn't have done it without them. They are unbelievable at their jobs, and they've had my back. And there's been a lot of distractions over that first 12 months.
Yeah.
And I couldn't have done it without them. And I think in business, the most important thing is your team you surround yourself with.
100%.
And I think if you start a business, the most important thing is your founding team members.
Yeah.
And I think getting the right systems, the right software, having the right people around me from the very beginning, from the very beginning, even without me there, that would have grown itself anyway, because they were brilliant.
Yeah.
That's what I'm most proud of, putting that together.
And what looking at the things that you're looking at within the business at the minute, what do you see as what's exciting you at the moment? What's getting you kind of fired up and excited about being able to do that maybe you couldn't do even a year ago or so with some of the tech stuff that you're looking at now, and just what kind of gets you fired up for it?
I think already our name's getting quite well known,
right,
which is very exciting for me.
Yep.
And we're working with some big companies already, which I think is testament to the team. I'm getting quite excited about all the sort of automation stuff that we're putting in, so that we can stay lean and keep going and deliver good customer service.
Yep.
And certain AI things are quite exciting. That goes as the automation stuff as well.
Yep.
I'm just excited for the next 12 months. We've got some really good sort of tenders going on at the moment that look like they might come off.
Yep.
So we've got dealing with some really cool new companies. So the whole thing's quite exciting. And I'm also excited because personal guarantees, hopefully.
Nearly done, yeah. Nearly done. So you just got, let's just talk about getting out of boxes, because I think as you move up, I mean, you had to go back to basically being an operator, didn't you?
Yeah.
Right? So you had to go back from that, running a team of 30, to go back to being an operator and you doing a lot of things.
Yeah.
Now you're sort of moving back up through the sort of the level from operator to sort of kind of like manager, leader space. And then obviously owner comes, or CEO, scale up CEO comes after that. But which boxes have you been getting yourself out of in the last kind of 3 or 4 months? Where have you gone, that's a really not good use of my time anymore, I need to start to get out of that box? And which ones have you been getting out of?
Most of them. I've been trying to, because I don't know if I'm lazy. I'm not lazy, but I don't like to.
You're leveraged. There's a difference. You're right.
And I think it's actually been really good for me to go back to very beginning to actually have to do the job,
Right.
to then go, right, this is not efficient. We're going to build something to make this efficient, whether it be our outbound or our management system or the way we deal with suppliers, anything like that. So the one I've got out most recently is the marketing and socials.
Yep.
Because my use is much better served looking after a £250,000 client.
Yep.
Or any kind of sale than that.
Do you think most people resist getting out of that box?
I think most people don't see the importance of socials and marketing. But I do think that's the one they'll try and do themselves and not get out of.
Right.
And I also think founders try and get themselves out of the sales box too soon.
I would agree. Yeah, I'm really glad you said that, actually, because you and I were talking, weren't we, before we came in here on camera, about the fact that even at this stage, you're still doing a sales course and you're going and studying sales.
Yeah.
Because I think if you can sell your way out of a problem, you never really have an issue, right?
No.
So you can always, if you can find a way, if you have that skill of being able to sell, you never really have a problem you can't solve.
No, but I think the reason I like to always learn, but with the sales one, I think the landscape is changing all the time.
Yeah, true.
When I was selling 10 years ago, selling is completely different now. You have to use so many different tools and angles to get hold of people. Most people won't answer their phones and you get so many cold calls.
Yep.
So I just think knowledge stacking repetitively is so important.
Yeah, agreed.
And as a salesperson, I think at the early stage, especially, there's no one as passionate about your business as you are,
right,
or can sell it as well as you can.
Yeah. I always think that's really interesting that quite often sort of founders who are, like you say, brilliant at it want to get out of that box quickly. And I'm like, well, actually, it's a lot easier to get out of the admin boxes, or bring someone in to manage the finances or production. Those boxes are much easier to get out of and systemize.
Yeah.
The sales box is actually one of the harder ones to get out of.
The hardest one, yeah.
I think so, yeah. I think so.
And I think what a lot of people, they look at sales as in just sales, but there's also mini boxes you can get out in sales.
Okay.
So like you've got the whole process of sales. So you've got lead generation, cold calling, prospecting.
Yep.
And you've got meetings, and you've got client retention, building relationships. So you can't just say, I'm getting myself out of sales.
Because that's all of it. Yeah, which bit of it.
So,
but that's true. You need very different people, I think, to do new business. Versus, I have a real challenge. I don't know if you do, but the people who use this language really kind of, I go, oh, it's so dated. But people still use the language, oh, I need a hunter, I need a farmer.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's going back to the 1980s, for goodness sake. Can we please move on from that? You don't. You need a relationship developer, or you need somebody who's going to kind of win business or grow or keep customers and grow them. It's like we need somebody who can build a brand and bring in new relationships and new customers, or we need someone who can do retention and retain the ones we've got.
Yeah.
This whole hunter farmer thing is a terror for me. It's like, oh, can we please upgrade the language somewhere, because it's awful.
Depends what you're selling as well. You're selling software or something, you need someone constantly hunting. But, for me, I could spend 3 months landing a partnership from for a competitor or someone that has much higher leverage than me making 50 cold calls a day.
Yeah.
But I think no business is the same.
No. But I just don't like the language of hunter, because it's like very much, you're saying you want these people to go out and basically kill your customers, right? I want people to go out and open relationships that last for the next 5 to 10 years. That's what I want people to do. I want people to find people who are in market for what you do. And the data says it's between 3 and 9% of people are in market for what you do at any given time. I want people to find people who are in market, and then I want you to build a relationship with them, and then I want you to bring them into our world and convert them and solve a problem for them.
Yep.
I want you doing that. I don't want you hunting people like you're out there trying to kill the next deal, and like it's just such a terrible mindset and language pattern, and it drives me crazy when I still see people talking about it, because I'm like, we live in a world of relationships and trust, and I think the way you've been able to come back is a demonstration that people had bought into you and bought into the new brand that you've established, which is AIM, correct?
Yeah.
So like, but they bought into that brand because they bought into you and
Yeah.
the team, to be fair, you and the team.
Yeah.
And that was because of the depth of relationship. That wasn't because of the brand name.
Well, for us, it's always been about relationships. And most of our work is from referrals.
Right.
People move into new businesses. But I've got clients I've worked with for 14 years,
right.
15 years.
Yeah.
We don't need to hunt like that.
But don't you think that's also when I've said that your network is your net worth, that's a great example of that, because those 14-year relationships have evolved, developed. You've been doing different things over those periods, yet the relationships have a value that expands goes across the whole of whatever you're doing.
Yeah.
And I'm sure if you did something next that was relevant to them, they'd be interested in it.
Yeah. Or they'd know someone that might be.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's all about relationships for us. So, and for everyone, really. I think it's so important to build those relationships, actually spend time going to see them for a coffee, not talk about work.
Yes.
Because there's so many people trying to contact these people all the time. You need to have.
Well, it's visibility, isn't it, as well? It's like, my point of view is if you have your top 20% of your customers, if you're not talking to them frequently, then your competition is.
Yeah.
And, if you think that they're remembering you, they're not, unless you've been visible in their world, which is why I think the social stuff is so important for visibility, to remind them about you. But you have to, I think in a world where everyone's going digital, you have to go back to old school of go sit with people, go have a conversation,
Absolutely.
go out for lunch, or, sit down and chat and just build. And it takes time, right? But people don't want to invest the time anymore.
No. And there's systems and automations now you can build for your teams as well, where you can actually set parameters and say if your clients are a grade A client, then it will trigger for them to have a face-to-face contact or a phone call at least once a week in that parameter, just so that you keep doing it.
Have you built that into the sort of the operating system for the business?
Yep.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. The challenge is getting people to sit down in front of you, but I think even a phone call or even just a WhatsApp to say, hey, how you doing?
Yeah.
Goes a long way.
Yeah, I think my favourite hack at the moment, and it won't last for long, but it will last for a while because most people still don't know about it, is to send video notes on WhatsApp.
Yeah, the little circle ones.
Yep, little circle ones, because I sort of spend about half an hour sending about 20 every week to people, and without question it generates conversations or discussions or opportunities, right?
Yeah.
And what's the best thing you can do? And people go, oh, I don't want to be in front of a camera. And I'm like, you're just talking to somebody on the end of a phone. It's FaceTime. It's basically FaceTime, but you get 1 minute.
Yeah.
Tell you what it does do as well is it gets you very good at distilling your message down to a minute, because you've got this countdown kind of clock on it.
Yeah.
And you can't waffle because you've only got a minute.
Yeah.
And I don't want to have to send a second one. That would look really poor, right?
Yeah.
So what's your definition now of a grown-up business compared to what it maybe was back when we met?
I think something that has the foundations. Now, a grown-up business could be. I don't think anymore. For me, it wouldn't come down to size,
right,
or revenue and profit. I think everyone's idea of that is different.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't say that this is this size is a grown-up business. I think that if you had even if you had a £500,000 business that had good financial controls, good sales process, your team were happy, whether you've got one person or 10 people, they're happy and they want to work for you, that would be a grown-up business.
Nice.
To me.
And seeing as we were talking about sales and it's something we're both passionate about, what are your top 3 sales sort of strategies or tips for people who want to scale their sales? What would be your top 3? What's your you go to, the 3 that, hey, I've got to generate some sales this month. What are the 3 things you're going to?
I think speed.
Yeah.
Follow up, speed.
Right. Yeah.
And keep doing it. Not think like, I haven't heard from a week, I'll leave it. I think follow up is critical. If you need to get money to sales in now, follow up's key.
Yep.
I think you getting your team used to the communication being rapid. People want to be spoken to.
Speed to lead stuff that Carly talks about, right?
Exactly, yeah, exactly that. And just having that ingrained in people. And I think have a bit of fun with it as well. Like I do things like I send tumbleweed emojis to clients and they don't reply to me, and I know they've seen it.
I send ghost ones. I send ones with a picture of a ghost of somebody. I'm like, "Are you ghosting me?" That one usually gets people come back. No, I'm just really, really busy.
Yeah. I learned on that sales university. There's actually some quite funny ones you can do. So there's to get their attention. So one is if you just use something like Canva, but get a picture of a billboard, and then not just type on it on Canva saying, "Hi, Paul. Took this billboard out to get your attention. Was it worth the money?"
Nice.
Things like that. He taught us another one as well, is you get two Starbucks coffee cups and just type on some sort of software, their name and yours, say fancy a coffee, this one's got your name on it.
Nice. Oh, I like that. That's
little things like that pattern interrupts, I think. Because for me, sales is about consistency.
Yep.
And just keep doing it even when you think I'm not getting anywhere, because you will get somewhere.
Yeah.
And if you really concentrate on the relationships, they will refer you to other people.
Yeah.
Or they move somewhere else, and then they move and they take you with them.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's the easiest client you're going to get. Shit.
Yes. So, yeah, that's definitely a growth strategy, but not one you can control.
Yeah. I think you've got to have a system. You've got to have some sort of CRM. You've got to know who you're trying to talk to. You're going after new business, but you have to have a process for the lead gen to the conversion, all of it.
How do you think your team would describe you as a leader now?
Hard question. How would they? Resilient, probably.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they came with me when I started. But I also, they know that they were getting paid, and I brought with them with me and all of the stuff with tribunals and whatever else going on. That I still supported them, even though I couldn't pay myself anything.
Yeah.
And I think they'd call me loyal. I think they'd call me resilient. I hope. You'd have to ask them.
I think resilience definitely got your name under it. Yep.
Yeah. I think that's probably what they'd describe me as.
Do you think resilience, sales, and finances, those three things are probably three of the best entrepreneurial skills you can master?
Yes. I think resilience, definitely. And there's ways that you can, there's things you can do to keep going. I think fitness and exercise, I think, is absolutely critical if you want to have a sharp mind and not get overwhelmed by stress.
Yeah.
But resilience, I think, is one of the most important skills you could have as a business owner, because you can have the best financial plan in the world. There's going to be days.
Yep.
Where you just need to keep going, and it's so easy to give up.
Yeah.
Just keep going.
Just keep showing up, right? Keep showing up. Keep
and ask for help.
Showing up. Yeah.
Talk to people. You're not actually in it alone. It's why the community we're in. So important. Because you're not actually, there's days where you think you're on your own, but you're not.
No.
You don't have to do it on your own.
Well, and you're also not, you might be in a room with other business owners in different industries, but you soon realize that everyone's going through the same stuff, right?
Yeah.
Everyone's going through the same stuff.
Yeah. All the time.
Yeah.
And they might show it that you think they're doing really well, but there'll be something going on. Because there always is.
Yeah.
But ask for help as well. Ask for people's advice.
Yeah.
And I think also give as much as you can give to other people.
Yeah, I love that.
Because the universe will reward you back.
Balances the books.
Yep.
It does. Give without expectation, it balances the books. Yeah. Listen, it's been a great conversation, and thank you for being so honest and vulnerable. And what would be your one piece of advice to any entrepreneur looking to scale their business in the next 12 months? What would be your final kind of one piece of advice to somebody in that position thinking, yeah, I really want to kind of grow, but I'm not quite sure. Should I do it? And what would be your piece of advice?
Financially model it.
Nice.
With an inch of its life, put plans together. Because there's a period that from what I've seen, not just from me, but from other people, there is a period between that size and that size, which is not not very fun, and it can sap a lot of cash.
Yes.
And you normally become much more unprofitable than at that point. You have to make sure you've got enough to go through it, but also realise how you're going to get there, how you're going to grow your teams.
Yeah.
So it's a bit of no man land in the middle.
Well, and that's why a lot of people don't make it out of that part of the scale-up journey. That's where you lose a lot of businesses that get stuck. That's why I say there's a different strategy to go from 0 to 500,000 than, say, to go from 500,000 to 1 million and 1 million to 5. They're different strategies on that scale-up journey. And I think having financial controls to go without that, to go for 500,000 to 1 million, you are going to come unstuck. You will come unstuck if you do not have those in place. And don't try and go from 1 to 3 without those in place, because it's just a question of, it's not if, it's when it collapses around you because you haven't seen something and there isn't something you understood or factored for or any of those kind of things.
And it all looks good and it happens very fast. Bank balance looks great.
Speed works both ways. Speed works for you and against you, right?
Yeah.
Listen, I want to thank you. Thanks for being on the podcast. Thank you for sharing your journey and your story. And keep inspiring and keep growing, my friend.
Yep. Thank you.
That concludes this episode of the Grown Up Business Podcast. I hope that got you fired up and ready to grow. The key thing, though, is to remember you get paid on what you get done. So write down the top 3 actions from the show and make sure that you implement those in the next 72 hours. Hey, and while you're at it, make sure you click the links and the resources below this episode to claim free growth resources to help you build the business you desire and deserve. I'll see you on the next episode.